Okay, we are rapidly finishing all our cuts and getting close to assembly here. We might have to do some slight modifying to make sure things fit just ever so perfectly. But what we got to get done left is our top. And our top has one really simple step to it, and that's making the 45-degree chamfer that goes around here. So the only dimension here that is about that is this little 1/4-inch mark here. Okay. Now the router should be set up for you. Let's see here. If you're ever unsure if it's set to the right depth or not and you want to check, just find a piece of scrap. As you can see here, this is where I set it. This is the first setting. You can see that's a really big chamfer, which isn't bad, I guess. But if you're going by that 1/4-inch like we saw on the sheet, you can see here this one is much closer to 1/4 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch. So again, this for this particular edge, I mean, this chamfer is purely cosmetic. It's just for, you know, how your top's gonna look. You know, it's not like there's gonna be some assembly where things aren't gonna fit. Like when we made our dados, that was really important. We made something dead on. For this is just, you know, putting an edge on something. So now we are going to put a chamfer all along it. So if you've got a prettier side, you're gonna want to put that down because it's cutting from the bottom. So you know, to ours looks pretty, you know, pretty straightforward. So I guess I like this side better for whatever reason. So we're gonna put that side down, and then we're gonna send this through. We're gonna make sure we go from from right to left. And when we make it through, we're gonna spin it 90 degrees, send it through again, spin it 90 degrees, send it through. We definitely don't wanna flip it. Otherwise, we would end up having one corner here and then one chamfer down here, which wouldn't be good. So let's go. And watch my hand position. Like I said, to me, the only real danger here is if you were trying to put your fingers behind here and get it under that guard. So just make sure your hands are nice and in a safe distance back. So that turned out pretty good. If there ever is a point where you think it didn't quite take off enough, or maybe you wiggled a little bit, just send it through again. You're using the fence as a guide, so if you made a mistake, that means you came off the fence, so which means you took off less. Sending it through again won't take off more. There's a set depth. So anyway, let's take a look at how our assembly is coming together. Now, a lot of you are gonna, you know, might have problems where maybe your shoulder comes out too far and you're gonna wanna sand it. You know, this is what you're gonna think you're gonna wanna do. Or maybe your stretcher comes out too far and you think you're gonna wanna sand it. Maybe one of your legs sits up too high, you're gonna wanna sand, you know, like I said before, there is nothing square about sanding. You know, again, if there's a tiny bit and you're really careful and you try to keep it straight, you might get away with something, but that's not the best way to do things. Okay, so I'm looking here, I'm seeing my top is nice and flush here. I am seeing a potential problem here. I wonder if I got everything tight, but you see here I have hopefully the camera angle works. I do have a pretty noticeable air gap. This one side is definitely higher than the other. It might be a little bit, it might be a little bit of a warp to my top. So actually, if I were to put a glue and clamp when I assemble this, that would fix a lot of that. So there's a little bit of an air gap there I could still probably work on. You know, that side looks pretty good. That's pretty clean. But anyway, so what would I do to this one to try to make it the best as possible? I think I would go back to the table saw and actually zing a little bit off the top of that leg. Make sure the blade is tipped 8 degrees. I don't know if you can see that. I can catch my thumb on that spot. Now, if that drops this too low and now there's an air gap there, I've got a problem. But yeah, I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to mark that with my pencil. I'm going to go back to the table saw, and I'm going to just barely graze that to see if I can get this to fit better. So I'm looking at everything. I'm looking at how the stretcher meets the top of the leg, how the stretcher meets the shoulder. If your stretcher's too high, you're going to have to cut your shoulder back at the bandsaws again. So this last assembly phase, checking it before you actually start gluing and screwing it together, can take a day or two. It's not to be, don't be surprised if that happens, because this really separates the really fine, high quality projects from the ones that just kind of look like they were put together quickly. More advice is to be patient. Don't be, try not to take off too much in one go. Don't get greedy, trying to hurry and get something done in just one cut. Okay. Yeah, my dados were a tight fit. Okay. Better. There's just still a little bit. Maybe I should go take another, 16th to 32nd off that. This side's nice and flush. A little bit of chip there, but yeah, I think I should take the time. I should go back and clean that up one more time. So, checking here, if this sticks out too far, if this stretcher sticks out too far, you may actually have to go back to the bandsaw and cut a little off here, because if this is sticking out too far, you cut a little more off here, that'll make the stretcher go in more. If your stretcher is sitting too high, you might have to cut a little off your shoulder here at the bottom to bring that down. So again, this is going to be frustrating. It might take a little bit of time. I really try to urge you to not just try to sand the top, because again, things could be crooked and things might not turn out. Like I said, check to see if your top's a little warped. That might throw your numbers a bit. Once we glue and put screws down and even some clamps if we have to, we can pull the warp out of that. So, I'm going to cut it here, and I'm going to shave a little more off on the table saw. I'm going to check these things, and then I'm going to, while it's all in separate pieces, I'm going to take a little bit of time to sand everything down, get rid of all these pencil lines. I definitely don't want to assemble and have all these pencil lines there. It's going to be really tough to sand later. So basically, this can take a couple of days, getting this exactly the way you want it. And because it's, once you're happy with this, the next step is to assemble, and you can't go back and zing a little off the top of the leg once the top's attached. You can't take a little off the inside of the leg or the shoulder, or make changes to the stretchers once it's assembled. So that's definitely a checkpoint you can't back up from. So definitely don't rush this process. Take your time. Try to get everything just flush to flush, flush, and but to be patient. I've seen a lot of people, they cut too much off and now they got to cut here, and then they end up cutting a little too much there and they have to go all the way around. Pretty soon I've seen step stools that are an inch shorter than they were supposed to be, because they kept going around and around and around and cutting too much off the shoulder, too much then off the top, and back and forth. So just be really patient. Give yourself a couple of days to do this, and cut off as little as possible each time. Like you see, I got to go back and cut a little more off, but that's okay. If I would have cut off too much, then I would have had a bigger problem. So be patient, take your time. I'll see you in the next video when we start talking about assembly.